To add two fractions together with different denominators, remember we need to get a common denominator. So if we want to add 1/5 plus 2/3, we need to rewrite these fractions so that they have the same denominator. The easiest way to get a common denominator is to take our two denominators and multiply them together. And so if we do that, 3 times 5 gives us 15. And so what we're doing here, when we want to add 1/5 plus 2/3, we're going to multiply that 3 times 5 to get 15. 15 is the least common multiple of 3 and 5. And so to take this first fraction and get that common denominator of 15, what we're doing is multiplying the 5 by 3. And if we multiply the denominator by 3, then we also have to multiply the numerator by 3. Because then we're really just multiplying that 1/5 by 3 over 3, or 1, so we're not changing the value of the fraction. Then for the second fraction, to get the common denominator, we have to multiply that 3 by 5. And if we multiply the denominator by 5, then we also have to multiply the numerator by 5. And so doing this gives us 3 over 15 plus 10 over 15. And now we have two fractions being added together with the same denominator, so we can just add the numerators together to get 13 over 15. If we want to add 1/3 plus 2, at first this looks different than the last example, but remember, 2 is the same thing as 2 over 1. So here again, we're adding two fractions with different denominators. Now in this case, the common denominator would be 3. When we multiply 3 times 1, we just get 3. The first fraction already has a denominator of 3, so we don't have to change anything there. But in the second fraction, we can multiply that denominator by 3 to get the common denominator of 3, which means we also have to multiply the numerator by 3 as well. So this gives us 1/3 plus 6/3. Now we have two fractions with the same denominator, so we can just add the numerators together to get 7/3. And subtraction works the same way. Here we have 3/4 minus 1/3. So before we can do the subtraction, we need to get a common denominator. We have 3/4 minus 1/3. And if we multiply the 3 and the 4 together, we'll get 12, right? So 12 is going to be our common denominator. So for the first fraction, I'm going to multiply by 3 over 3. And for the second fraction, we'll multiply by 4 over 4, which will give us 9 over 12 minus 4 over 12. So we've rewritten both terms as equivalent fractions with the same denominator. And so now we can do the subtraction just by subtracting those two terms in the numerator. 9 minus 4 will give us 5, and this is over 12. So in this example, we have a word problem. It says, Emily baked a batch of cookies and divided them into two different containers. In the first container, she placed 2/3 of the cookies. And in the second container, she placed 1/4 of the cookies. Later, she decided to combine the cookies from both containers into a single large container, and we want to know what fraction of the total batch of cookies is now in the large container. In that first container, she had 2/3 of her batch of cookies. And then in the second container, she had 1/4 of her batch of cookies. And so to figure out what fraction of the total batch of cookies would be in the large container when she combines them, we're going to add these two fractions together. So here again, we have two fractions with different denominators. So we're going to need to get a common denominator. So if we multiply 3 and 4, that'll give us 12. 12 will be our common denominator. So this first fraction will multiply by 4 over 4 The second fraction will multiply by 3 over 3, which gives us 8 over 12 plus 3 over 12. Now we have two fractions with the same denominator, so we can add these together by adding the numerators. 8 plus 3 will give us 11 over 12. So that means in the large container, she has 11/12 of her original batch of cookies. For another example, this says a store is having a buy one, get one half off sale. The original price of an item is X dollars. What would the total price be before taxes for both items? So it's a buy one, get one half off sale, which means we're going to buy one item at the original price, and the second item is half off. So if the first item costs X dollars, then the second item would be half of that. So X divided by 2. And so to find the total price before taxes, we're going to add X plus X over 2. And so here again, you can think of X really as being X over 1. So even though we have an X here, we're still just adding two fractions with different denominators. So we need to get a common denominator, which in this case would be 2. And so to get that common denominator in that first fraction, we could multiply by 2 over 2. The second fraction already has a 2 in the denominator, so we don't have to change anything, which gives us 2x over 2 plus x over 2. Now we have two fractions with the same denominator being added together. So we can add the numerators together. 2x plus 1x would give us 3x, and this is over 2. Multiplying two fractions together is fairly straightforward. When you want to multiply two fractions together, remember that you can do this by multiplying the numerators together and the denominators together. So to multiply 1/3 and 2/5, we can do this by multiplying the 1 times the 2 over the 3 times the 5, which gives us 2 over 15. So to multiply two fractions together, you can just think about multiplying straight across. So Sarah is planning a 300-mile road trip. She drove 3/5 of the total distance on the first day. How many miles did she drive on the first day? So we know she's planning 300 miles. She's already driven 3/5 of that total on the first day. We want to know how many miles that is. We can do this by taking our 300 miles and multiplying by 3/5. Now remember, 300 is the same as 300 over 1, so we really are just multiplying two fractions together. So we can multiply the numerators together to get 900, and the denominators together. 5 times 1 just gives us 5. And then we could simplify this just a little bit more. 900 divided by 5 is 180. So on that first day, she drove 180 miles. To divide two fractions, remember the rule is that we're going to multiply by the reciprocal of that second fraction. So for something like 1/3 divided by 2/5, this is going to be the same thing as 1/3 times the reciprocal, 5/2. And again, when we want to multiply two fractions together, we can do this by multiplying straight across. So this would be 1 times 5 over 2 times 3, or 5/6. Emma has 2/3 of a cake, and she wants to share it equally among her 4 friends. How much cake will each friend receive? And so here Emma has 2/3 of a cake, and she wants to divide this cake equally among her 4 friends, so among 4 people. So we're going to take this 2/3, and we're going to divide by 4. But remember, 4 is the same thing as 4 over 1. And when we're dividing two fractions, we're going to flip that second fraction and multiply. So this is really the same thing as 2/3 times 1/4. Now we are multiplying two fractions together, so we can multiply straight across. This will give us 2 times 1, which is 2, over 3 times 4, which is 12. Now, notice here the numerator and denominator are both divisible by 2, so we could reduce this fraction a little bit. 2 goes into 2 one time, and 2 goes into 12 6 times. So this fraction will simplify to 1/6, which means that each of her friends gets 1/6 of the cake.